guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope April treated you well. It's crazy how fast time is going. Um, wow. For yeah, for all of you who are new to my channel, my name is Jessica Lang, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist from California. Um, my practice is solely online, and I specialize in treating clients who are survivors of trauma, specifically sexual abuse, as well as people going through adjustment issues, adjusting to a new culture, expats who live abroad. And I also do lots of work with toddlers and parents. So, with that being said, let's get started on today's topic. This topic will be focused on complex trauma, which is also known as developmental trauma. Um, when I talk about developmental trauma or complex trauma, we're talking about traumas that have occurred over the course of one's lifespan. They usually begin when someone is about a toddler or in early childhood years and can go on until adolescence, um, but it stops by adulthood. And complex trauma, developmental trauma is different than what you think of for like single event trauma is what we call them, in that it it's multiple traumas over the course of a person's life. One way also to look at developmental trauma is to think of it as adverse experiences. So these are, the reason why we look at it more like as adverse experiences rather than just stating trauma is because most people don't think that what they've experienced throughout their life is trauma, because they're looking at it from adult eyes. And with adult eyes, we have more information, we have more experiences. So saying that, moving multiple times, well, that's not a trauma. Well, for a kid who's trying to figure out who they are in the world, figuring out, like trying to make friends, trying to form friendships, multiple moves and losses of relationships can feel like trauma, can feel like abandonment. So for the purposes of today, I'm going to just use adverse experiences because I think that's more, like it's more relatable and people can kind of see how those early events, multiple events over their life, have affected them even today. So some examples of adverse experiences that um, may contribute to problems later in life are a loss of a parent, whether that's death, they just left because they got remarried and they left the family, or they're incarcerated, etc. Like I mentioned before, frequent moves. Um, Lots of people have to move because of jobs and work. Um, One of the problems as a parent when you work and you have to move a lot is that your child is constantly having to readjust and um, get used to like a new environment, get used to new people, and that actually raises their anxiety level, raises their stress level, and it makes it hard for them to connect with other people because they figure, hey, why get connected to this person? I'm going to leave in a couple months or a year or whatever. So it makes forming relationships really, really, really hard. Um, Chronic pain or health problems in a parent got to go to who's got to be in a hospital multiple times, or even for the child if they have chronic medical conditions, um, not knowing what's going on and the pain of, you know, obviously chronic pain, all are considered adverse experiences that could affect someone later in life. Parents who have high conflict in the home, so even if it's not physical violence, verbal abuse between parents is very scaring. Lots of yelling, slamming doors, even, believe it or not, like complete withdrawal is very, very, very scary for a child, a young child who doesn't understand the nuances like adults do. And so those are just like a couple of examples. I also want to add, before I forget, living in a neighborhood with a lot of violence or living in a country where there's terrorism and a lot of violence. All of these things conspire to make a very reactive and stressed out nervous system that's very sensitive to the environment and sensitive to triggers and can have long term, not only health, like physical health, but also mental health problems later. So when we look at these experiences through a child's eyes, you can see how they create a lot of anxiety, which revs up the stress response system. And this leads to other behaviors that are aimed at decreasing and easing the anxiety. Um, and the problem is that they're not stored. Like these early experiences are not stored in the verbal memory, right? Because the child at the time doesn't have that type of language to say, I was very upset or I was very anxious because blah, blah, blah. Like they just don't have that memory. But what happens is it gets stored in their body. So the body remembers. Um, and so they start to act out as children in certain ways to kind of protect themselves, right? And these behaviors are very normal and adaptable, and they respond to the environment that they're in because we're human. We respond and we adapt to the environment that we live in, and so it's normal that a child would do the same. But the problem is that if it goes unchecked, right, without like awareness or understanding, you grow up and these behaviors become part of who you are. And you likely kind of like what ends up happening for people is that these behaviors like, not getting close to people because I'm afraid that they're gonna leave leads to an adult who continues to avoid relationships because they feel like people are gonna leave them. Um, so just some examples that I want to show of like signs that maybe these adverse experiences that you experienced as a child are impacting you now as an adult, or even, your teen is displaying them, or even your child you're noticing kind of display some of these behaviors. Um, it's not age specific. They can be exhibited across the lifespan. So some of these include like constantly being on guard, so not showing who you really are, for fear of being rejection, so you're protecting yourself. Low self-esteem, low self-worth, feeling like you don't deserve good things, feeling angry much of the time. Um, it's even if it's not an anger outburst, but you feel like that, like it's boiling just underneath, right? Like a little silent rage, or a ticking time bomb. Feeling numb or not feeling anything at all, is also very common. Feeling disconnected from other people, feeling disconnected from yourself, not remembering things that you should remember, and also, probably the most common is difficulty with intimacy. So this might be problems forming healthy relationships. So maybe you're constantly in bad relationships, um, or you're not enjoying sex. Maybe you engage in sex, but there's no enjoyment. You're just kind of going through the motions, or you, similar to what I mentioned before, you don't even remember the experience of sex. So these are just some of the things to be on the lookout for. To maybe might be a result of kind of those early adverse experiences that I mentioned before. So now I want to just be clear also that not everyone who experiences adverse experiences as a child or trauma, you know, during childhood has, develops PTSD or depression or anxiety into adulthood. One of the buffers, as we like to say, or one of the protective factors is a child's relationship with healthy, nurturing, predictable, loving adults in their lives. People who are there for them, people who can take those cues and notice when something's wrong and support them with what they need. So, and that's, I mean, even as a part of healing, having those people around who can support you as you grow is a big part of moving past this. So I just wanted to just share a little bit of, um, what developmental trauma is, aka complex trauma, um, what the signs are, how you can get help, and that there is hope for you. You don't have to be alone. You don't have to suffer. You can move past these things and have a fulfilling, loving life. Okay, so if this resonated with you, or sounds like somebody you know, and you're just realizing that you or this person is really struggling, um, don't, don't hesitate to seek professional help. There is no shame in that. We all need help from time to time, and it can move you from a place of feeling disconnected and alone and feeling numb or angry to feeling hope and joy, and it can just move you into a better place. So, all right, so now it's your turn. Uh, if any of this sounds like you or your experience, um, let me know what you've used to kind of cope. Um, Feel free to drop me a message in the comment box below or send me an email at jlanetransitionsconsulting.com. I'd love to hear from you. And now, bonus time. As I mentioned in the intro, I work with toddlers and parents, and one of the things I just completed is a fabulous e-course for parents who are struggling with their toddlers. Toddlers are like many of us like to call them little terrorists because they seem to control everything with their emotional outbursts and their tantrums, and it can just be really overwhelming for parents. And so, if you are struggling with your toddler, or you know somebody who's struggling with a toddler, this e-course is right up your alley. It will give you some cool tips and tricks for kind of getting rid of those tantrums so you can have a peaceful home again. So, if that sounds like something that you are interested in, check the e-course out at jessicalane.podia.com. So all of that will be in the description box, and I will see you all next month.